murder dog, truths untold. Chelsea burned deeper than a well, eyes from his lips like a death toll bell.
Jamie here with Country Diggers. Today we're going to be reading from The Bloody Century, True Tales of Murder in 19th Century America by Robert Wilhelm. He also does the website murderbygaslight.com. And today we're going to be doing a murder ballad, Lydia Sherman. And you know, I gotta sing. It's a murder ballad, gotta sing. And I'll be singing from The Mockingbirds, the Ballad of Lydia Sherman. All right, stay tuned. It's gonna be a good one. The Ballad of Lydia Sherman by the Mockingbirds. Lydia Sherman is plagued with rats. Lydia has no faith in cats. So Lydia buys some arsenic, and then her husband gets sick, and then her husband, he does die, and Lydia's neighbors wonder why. Lydia moves but still has rats, and still she puts no faith in cats. So again she buys some arsenic. This time her children, they get sick. This time her children, they do die. And Lydia's neighbors wonder why. Lydia lies in Wethersfield jail, and loudly does she moan and wail. She blames her fate on a plague of rats. She blames the laziness of cats. But her neighbor's questions she can't deny. So Lydia now in prison must lie. All right, now on to the story. The Poisoned Fiend. When Horatio Sherman took sick after returning home from a week-long drunken spree, he said it was just one of his old spells. His wife Lydia agreed and doused him with brandy as usual. But Horatio's doctor, who had treated his alcohol-induced spells before, was suspicious this time. And when Horatio died 2 days later, the doctor ordered a post-mortem examination that revealed the cause of death to be arsenic poisoning. When it was further learned that Lydia Sherman's first 2 husbands and 7 of her children had died of arsenic poisoning as well, she was called the Arch-Murderess of Connecticut, the modern Borgia, and the Poison Fiend. Dates were May 1864 to May 1871. Locations: Danbury, Connecticut, New York, New York. Victims: Edward Struck, Martha Ann Struck, Edward Struck Jr., William Struck, George Whitfield Struck, Ann Liza Struck, Dennis Holbert, Frank Sherman, Ada Sherman, and Horatio Sherman. Cause of death: poisoning. Accused: Lydia Sherman. Born Lydia Danbury in Burlington, New Jersey in 1824, Lydia Sherman was orphaned at the age of 9 months and raised by an uncle. At 16, she was working as a tailor in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and had joined the Methodist Church. At church, she met Edward Struck, a widower with 4 children, and when Lydia was around 20, she and Edward were married. They lived happily in New York City, raising 6 children, but their lives changed when Edward Struck took a job on the newly formed New York Metropolitan Police Force. Struck was called to a disturbance in New York hotel and arrived too late to prevent a murder. The rumor began to circulate that Struck had stayed away out of fear for his own life. An inquest was held and Struck was dismissed from the force. Edward Struck became severely despondent after his dismissal and was unable to hold a job. Eventually, he stopped trying to work and was ashamed to even leave the house. He began talking about suicide, and his former boss, a police captain, advised Lydia to send him to a lunatic asylum. Another policeman, a sergeant who lived in the same building, concluded that Struck was out of his mind and would never recover. He advised Lydia to get him out of the way and told her use arsenic, giving her instructions on where to buy it and how much to use. After giving it some thought, Lydia bought some arsenic from a druggist and added a thimbleful to a portion of oatmeal gruel, which she gave to her husband. That night Struck became violently ill. A doctor was called who told Lydia that her husband had softening of the brain and would never recover. Struck died at 8 o'clock the next morning. While Struck's death eased some of the tension on Lydia, she still had financial problems. She did not believe she could adequately support her two youngest children, 6-year-old Martha Ann and 4-year-old Edward, and decided it would be better for them if they were out of the way. What an evil woman. Lydia began giving them each small amounts of arsenic. When they became sick, the doctor said they had gastric fever. After severe vomiting, both children died. He was a beautiful boy, Lydia said later about Edward, and did not complain during his illness. Lydia now had 4 children in the house and was working as a nurse and seamstress. Wouldn't you hate to have her for a nurse? She'd just soon poison you. Her 14-year-old son, George, was earning $2.50 a week as a painter. When George took sick with painter's colic, in parentheses, and could no longer work, Lydia feared he would become a burden. She mixed a little arsenic with his tea. The doctor said George died of painter's colic. The older children had moved out, and now only Aunt Liza was living with Lydia. Downhearted and much discouraged, Lydia thought if she could get rid of Aunt Liza, she and her oldest daughter, Lydia, could make a living together. When Aunt Liza came down with a fever that winter, Lydia added a little arsenic to her medicine. Aunt Liza died 4 days later. That same winter, her oldest daughter died of natural causes, leaving Lydia all alone. After trying several other occupations, Lydia took a job as a housekeeper for an old woman in Stratford, Connecticut. 8 months later, she left this job for another housekeeping position with an old man named Dennis Holbert. Within a few days of her employment, Holbert proposed marriage, and Lydia accepted. Lydia was happy as Mrs. Holbert for about 14 months. Then Dennis Holbert took sick, though it was later proven that Holbert died of arsenic poisoning. Lydia claimed in her confession that she was not responsible. I wish to say that I never gave Mr. Holbert anything to my knowledge that would cause any sickness whatever. There may have been arsenic in one of the papers I put together, but if there was, I did not know it. In his will, Dennis Holbert left Lydia the house and $10,000. She was then approached by Horatio N. Sherman, a widower who was looking for someone to care for his baby. He soon proposed to her, and although she did not agree right away, she was quite taken with Sherman and agreed to help him out of debt. They eventually married, but things did not work out as well as she planned. Sherman turned out to be a hopeless alcoholic who could not be trusted with money. Sherman's mother-in-law was still living with them and taking care of the baby, Frank. One day Sherman remarked to Lydia that he wished Frank would die so the old woman would have no reason to stay. This made sense to Lydia, who put some arsenic in little Frankie's milk. She also poisoned Sherman's 14-year-old daughter, Ada. Horatio Sherman's drinking increased. He did nothing to help his family and spent every cent Lydia gave him on liquor. Lydia finally convinced him to join a temperance society, and Sherman took a sobriety pledge. He kept the pledge for several weeks, then sold the piano for $300 and went on a binge. Sherman was sick when he returned home a week later. Lydia put arsenic in a bottle of brandy, and the more Sherman drank, the sicker he got. When a doctor examined him, Sherman said, "It may be one of my old spells." But Dr. Beardsley did not think the symptoms were consistent with alcohol-related sickness and suspected foul play. Sherman died the next day, and Dr. Beardsley performed a post-mortem examination. Dr. Beardsley's suspicions were confirmed when Sherman's stomach was chemically analyzed. Sherman had died of arsenic poisoning, and Lydia was charged with his murder. The bodies of Frankie and Ada were exhumed, and it was determined that they died of arsenic poisoning as well. Then Dennis Holbert was exhumed, and another count of murder was added against Lydia. The trial, April 16, 1872. Lydia Sherman's trial lasted 8 days. It was well attended and closely followed by newspapers throughout America. The stories often commented on how ordinary Mrs. Sherman looked. The prim and proper 48-year-old defendant came to court wearing a black alpaca dress, black and white shawl, straw hat, and black kid gloves. She appeared calm and almost cheerful behind her thin, lacy veil. The defense tried to convince the jury that Horatio Sherman had taken arsenic accidentally, or perhaps had committed suicide. Despondent over his financial problems and the recent deaths of his 2 children. But the evidence against Lydia was overwhelming. She was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Aftermath: after waiting sentencing, Lydia Sherman dictated her confessions in which she admitted to most of the murders. She was admitted to most of the murders she was accused of committing. The book became a bestseller. Lydia Sherman died in Wethersfield Prison in 1878. And the ballad, this anonymous ballad was originally published as a broadside sold in Boston. It probably began life as a poem, but has since been set to music. And the music, if you want to listen to it, the Mockingbirds They have it on YouTube, and it's called The Ballad of Lydia Sherman. All right, hope y'all enjoyed, and don't trust your spouse. All right.